is having a moment right now, but not the kind they want. The company is having a problem with space junk crashing back to Earth. Let's dive in with what's been going on with this debris, why it's happening, and the larger issues surrounding space junk right now. Space junk is generally a huge problem. Whether it's crashing back to Earth, inactive debris cluttering up low Earth orbit, or even one of the many active satellites wreaking havoc on ground-based astronomy. Remember SpaceX Starlink satellites photobombing my photo of the Northern Lights? We are having a lot of problems with space junk, and it's just getting worse. And I want to emphasize, this is not a problem that is limited to SpaceX. The issue is widespread across the space industry, commercial space, military space, civil space. It affects everyone. But because SpaceX is launching the most satellites and is the most active launch company right now, the focus is squarely on them. SpaceX also gets a lot of attention here because environmental issues don't seem to be very high on their priority list. A recent investigative article in the New York Times dove into the environmental damage from Starship launches on the wildlife areas around SpaceX's Boca Chica, Texas launch site. And another recent study showed that SpaceX's Starlink satellites may actually be harming the ozone layer when they burn up. It's a little strange because the reason that the company's CEO says he wants to colonize Mars is because of the drastic implications of climate change. SpaceX is a company that generally tries to move as quickly as possible, and they have not made environmental issues a priority. Their emphasis on reusability isn't really about being environmentally friendly, but about bringing down the costs of launching to space. So, let's talk specifically about this trash problem. On multiple occasions over the last few weeks, debris from a SpaceX Dragon capsule has ended up in parts of North America. It's honestly just dumb luck they didn't hit anything or harm anyone. You might remember a report I did on a piece of ISS space trash hitting someone's home in Florida. That was not SpaceX, that was from a JAXA pallet released by NASA and the International Space Station. But back to SpaceX, there are a couple of distinct events to talk about. On May 22, 2024, a landscaper discovered a piece of junk about a half a mile up a hiking trail owned and maintained by a company called the Glamping Collective, which is located about 20 minutes west of Asheville in the mountains of North Carolina. It was pretty random that the debris was even discovered. Had it not landed on a hiking trail, it's very possible it would have gone undiscovered. The Glamping Collective didn't respond to my inquiries about the debris, but according to an article in the New York Times, SpaceX hasn't reached out about it at all. The company is keeping the junk and actually is currently advertising it on their website. Astronomer Jonathan McDowell, who tracks active satellites and space debris, tracked this piece of debris to the trunk from the re-entry of SpaceX's Crew 7 mission. The capsule deorbited on May 21st. There was also a smaller piece of debris found in North Carolina from that same trunk that actually hit someone's house, but as far as I can tell, didn't do any significant damage. The other situation is even more interesting because it involves cross-border issues. Multiple pieces of debris landed on a farm in Saskatchewan, which is in rural Canada. If you're on Mastodon at all, Sam Lawler, who is a professor of astronomy and is an expert and my go-to person when talking about anything space junk or satellite pollution related. Sam has an amazing thread on this entire saga, which I will link below. By chance, the junk landed about an hour away from her farm. The Canada piece of debris has been traced back to the Axiom 3 mission, a private crewed mission to the ISS, also aboard a Crew Dragon. That deorbited on February 26th, and it's not clear when it hit the farm, but it was discovered on April 28th. This farm is about 10,000 acres in size, and the biggest piece of debris weighs in at around 100 pounds. According to Sam, who's on the right of this picture with the farmer on the left, this piece of debris is about 4 feet by 6 feet. Here's another piece that was found that was 9 feet long and weighed about 80 pounds. Sam estimates that in total, the discovered debris weighed about 250 pounds. Jonathan McDowell tracked this junk as well. Here is the re-entry track of the Crew Dragon trunk. The interesting thing here is the legal issues on responsibility. Technically, according to the Outer Space Treaty, and I quote, "States parties to the treaty shall bear international responsibility for national activities in outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, whether such activities are carried on by governmental agencies or non-governmental entities, and for assuring that national activities are carried out in conformity with the provisions set forth in this present treaty." That means for any SpaceX objects in orbit, the US government is the responsible party. But who owns it if it falls back to Earth? The treaty doesn't explicitly cover that. It's from 1967. But considering the US government was responsible for it in space, feels like they should be responsible for it if it falls back to Earth as well, and this should be a thing handled by governments. And in this case, whether it's in space or on Earth, it is the property of SpaceX. It shouldn't be handled by an astronomer reaching out to a farmer, which is basically what ended up happening. Sam did great work here, but this wasn't her job and it should not have been her responsibility. What ended up happening is that a representative from SpaceX likely saw the interviews, or someone contacted them after seeing Sam speak about it, and reached out to the farmer to ask for the debris back. Because SpaceX still technically owns the debris, the farmer was legally required to surrender it at that point, but he was able to ask for compensation in return. In this case, he asked for a donation to the local skating rink, and he got it. $5,000 per piece, and they found 3 pieces. But $15,000 still seems small, considering this junk could have easily killed someone. SpaceX apparently sent someone in a U-Haul to pick up the debris, and that's kind of the end of that saga. But according to Jonathan McDowell, there have been 23 Crew Dragon trunk re-entries total. 18 were either over water or in inaccessible places, which leaves 5 over inhabited areas. There has been debris discovered from 4 of those 5 re-entries. Pieces of debris were found in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and in Australia back in 2022. This is a big deal. As I mentioned, it could have easily injured or killed someone considering the size, weight, and speed that it hits at. So what's next? Well, it's important to note that SpaceX has not confirmed that these pieces of debris are from their spacecraft to any reporter. I reached out to them and, unsurprisingly, received no response. But NASA did respond to my inquiry and confirmed that SpaceX had confirmed to them that these were pieces from SpaceX missions. They're both Crew Dragon missions, and the debris is specifically from the vehicle's trunk. If you're familiar with capsule spacecraft, generally they have crew capsules and then a service module, which is where the main propulsion is located, as well as support systems for the mission. Before re-entry, the crew jettisons the service module and it burns up in the atmosphere, or at least it's supposed to. As a side note, this is part of why the Boeing Starliner crewed flight test mission has been extended so long. The problems they're studying are in the service module, and they need to know how to fix them before they can come back, because the service module does not return to Earth. For more on that mission, check out my video. You can think of the Crew Dragon trunk as similar to a service module, but it's basically empty. It has no engines. It's basically just an unpressurized cargo container that supports the spacecraft during launch. Half of it is covered in solar panels for power generation as well. When it's time to come home, Crew Dragon autonomously undocks from the ISS and uses a departure burn to move away from the space station. It then performs engine maneuvers to lower its orbit and position it properly. Once a spacecraft is in place, it jettisons the trunk and then conducts the deorbit burn that lasts around 12 minutes. Then the capsule re-enters, parachutes deploy, and it splashes down. The trunk makes it back way more slowly in an uncontrolled re-entry, and it is supposed to fully burn up in the atmosphere. But clearly, that is not what's happening. What NASA said to me is that during the design and testing phase, the trunk was evaluated to fully break up and incinerated. As an aside, I'd love to see those reports, but they aren't publicly available, and NASA didn't respond to my request to see them, which is not surprising because these spacecraft are the property of SpaceX and not NASA. Because SpaceX did pick up the debris in Canada, they will now evaluate it to figure out why exactly the trunk isn't fully disintegrating during re-entry. The Dragon trunk is made of a composite material that was enhanced during the development of Dragon 2. Crew Dragon and the Dragon cargo module are just 2 variants of Dragon 2, which first launched on an uncrewed test flight in 2019. Dragon 1 was retired in 2020. That newer composite material is a thermal protection system made of carbon fiber, and it's likely that its sturdy composition is what's making it resist burning up in the atmosphere. NASA and SpaceX are looking at all the options to mitigate this trunk debris situation. According to an interview with Commercial Crew Program Manager Steve Stitch over at NASA, as reported by Jeff Faust at Space News, they are looking at changing the deorbit procedures for now. The trouble is, doing that would involve doing the deorbit burn while the trunk was still attached, and then jettisoning the trunk after that. There are still challenges to work out here if that's what they end up doing, including needing extra propellant to do that burn with the trunk attached, and ensuring proper positioning of the trunk after it's jettisoned. It's important to note, though, this is aimed at ensuring the debris falls into the ocean and not on any populated areas. It does not fix the junk issue in and of itself. For that, they'd most likely have to redesign the trunk. I'll continue to follow this story and see what happens. All I can say now is that we do need to do better, both by humans and respect for space. Space junk is becoming a bigger and bigger problem, and we need better management and more regulations to preserve our night skies for future generations and to make sure we're not cluttering up Earth orbit with junk. This is just one example of a much, much larger problem that we need to address now. But for now, thank you for watching. I am Swapna Krishna, and this is Ad Astra.